Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drum McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Jim Bouse, Vice President for Enrollment Management at the University of Oregon and former board chair for ACRO. Jim has been at the forefront of the development and changes in enrollment management, and he joins us today to talk about how enrollment has changed and is changing in the COVID era, and as well as the upcoming enrollment cliff, and what institutions need to do to grow or stabilize their enrollment. Jim, welcome to the program.
Hi, Jerome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We did a webinar, gosh, what was it, 3-4 years ago about enrollment management, and I'm really excited to have you on to talk about what's going on in the world of enrollment pre, current, and post-COVID.
Yeah, let's get into that. We last spoke and had our webinar pre-COVID. We're still within COVID. And of course, we can all do some prognostication on what's going to happen post-COVID, but I'm sure you know as well as I that if we had that kind of crystal ball, we would be well positioned to helping a lot of people with that. But we'll do the best we can on what we see in the trends.
I think if we had that kind of prognostication ability, we would have built our own universities.
Yes.
And been able to fund them as well. So we're seeing a lot of crazy things. My friend Gordon Gee has reminded me multiple times, COVID is accelerating needed changes in higher education by a decade or more. It's completely shot to pot all the models of what we thought higher ed should be. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what you're seeing. What are some of the indicators that you're seeing and some of the trends?
Well, I think Gordon probably hasn't loosened that bow tie up, and I think he's spot on with that. Particularly, you could see immediately when we went into COVID and we had to go remote, there was a hyper acceleration of adoption of technologies to help do that. There were a lot of things planned. A lot of people have been ahead of that curve, but boy, people had to adopt quickly and move forward. And people that didn't see the value in those things suddenly saw this is possible. The same thing happened with, should I let an employee work remotely or not? Is that even possible? Can they get work done? If nothing else, this showed that, yes, you can keep going. Obviously, there are some things that have to happen in person. You can't exactly feed somebody some food remotely. It's not very nutritious or sustaining. But I agree that the same way it hyper-accelerated some of the adoptions and changes and uses of technology, the same thing happened with hyper-accelerating some of those trends we saw happening. In trends I think of just looking at demographic trends, population, traditional students, high school graduates across the nation and in different regional areas of the United States, trends and macroeconomic trends across the globe, geopolitical trends and things that happen with that, to international students, to the impacts there of all of those things, either demographics on international, political ramifications and economic ramifications of that, and then along with throwing COVID on top of that. So there were a lot of trends that were in place. This accelerated a lot of those. It showed us that, yes, you can do things remotely. And then that brought to a head a lot of things of, were you on the edge with how you're operating your institution? Are you now competing even in a broader field, that realizing more and more you are not the only player on the chessboard? So there are a lot of pieces and players out there operating, and you can't just be kind of a myopic view of like, how do we just deal with our own institution, our own pie? Who's out there competing with us? Who's pulling our students in a more economically feasible fashion? They're doing something less expensively. And are you just offering something that is a common good? So are your courses and your programs, et cetera, like that, easily replicated somewhere else? Mm-hmm. Or can you adapt to those trends to still pull people towards you? So I think, again, demographics, economics, political trends. People are looking at, with increases in costs and being able to do things remotely, kind of questioning. It's been more and more on people's minds of what's the value of higher education? What's my return on investment? So both students getting smarter about that, and of course parents are looking at what is it worth, us funding this for our child. What's the return on investment for that? The student looking at what level of indebtedness am I willing to take on as prices and costs rise? Is it worth it? Will I make that back on the other side? Will a level of an indebtedness keep me from doing things beyond graduation? Saving for a home, adequately saving for retirement, things of society that will impact our nation going out 30, 40, 50 years beyond this.
Mm-hmm. So, those are all major trends. And I would have to say that the kids coming out of high school right now, frankly, they're in the minority as far as the people going to school. I remember back 3 years ago, research coming out of one of the marketing groups that said that the non-traditional students made up 74% of all people going to college and university at this point. I don't think those numbers have changed, have they?
No, you're seeing that. If you talk about, demographics of traditional high school age students coming out, and you're seeing those flatten and dip in different areas. So people look at, where are students coming from? So you're looking at, are there returning veterans that are going to be looking for using GI benefits for school? Is there, adult learners, people returning to school, people that looked at, didn't complete a degree, but can they come back? Are they going to finally complete that? Are there folks that are looking for things like, maybe even not the, what can you offer them aside from a degree, but do you have a certificate? Do you have some other sort of marker of completion of something that shows that I've gained this competency and I've gained this knowledge to help pursue this objective that I'm working with a local employer that I know is going to help me either get a raise or it's going to help me get a job in something that I'm more interested in doing. And we're seeing right now, we're in the great resignation and the people of quitting and shifting jobs. I mean, it's never been at this point like it is now, just people with flexibility and possibilities.
Yeah. And it's a good thing for the employees, for employers. It's making them come into the 21st century with respect to wages, working conditions, etc. But from the university perspective, it puts a whole new onus on the university to make sure that they're training people. I mean, your statement about what is the value? People are starting to question the value, and we'll get into business models in a little bit. But I think you made a statement prior to us coming on. In the past, when we've had the go-go years, 10 years ago or more, never had to worry about enrollment. It was always going to grow. That's not the case. Year over year, we lost 1 million students in higher education. We've got the enrollment cliff coming up. Gone are the days, and you said this very aptly, gone are the days that we can grow our way out of these problems. You just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and Drum, one of the things I was thinking of too, or I said, was we all as institutions have to think of not just growth for growth's sake, but does it have a purpose? And if you can't, then you also have to think about, who are you? Or as I like to think about, who do you want to be when you grow up as an institution?
Mm-hmm.
What is your goal? Do you have a goal? Growing is not a goal. Just grow. For what purpose? You've got to have a purpose. So there's got to be, why are you trying to do that? But a lot of us need to think of, you look at a model like, Harvard, Yale, you look at Ivy League schools that aren't, their whole thing isn't like, let's just grow enrollment and see if we can double enrollment and do that. It's, who are we? Let's focus on it. So do you have a number as an institution? Like, this is where we look at our sweet spot of what we can do with our fixed costs. If you're going to grow, you're going to have your fixed costs, but then you may be increasing those in kind of a stair-step fashion, but you're always going to have those increasing variable costs. And I think I'm probably jumping ahead to business model type of things, but you're looking at, who do you want to be when you grow up? What is your ideal enrollment size? And then focus on, I like to think, the main thing is the main thing is the main thing. Why do you exist? What makes your institution different? What are your distinctive competencies? Do you have a lot of other things that can be easily replicated by others and done remotely, done less expensively, that people could pursue? But why do they want to come to you? And particularly in this age of hybrid and remote, if you're a residential institution and a lot of your operation depends on that, why do people want to come to you? Why should they come to you? What is it about the experience you're going to offer and the value that you're going to offer that can't be easily replicated somewhere else? Why do people want to come to you? So you've got to enhance that and look at what is our main purpose. Let's focus down on what are our distinctive areas that are difficult for others to replicate and can't compete against us, and what can we offer that others can't. So you've just got to focus on the main thing. And what are you really good at? And let's look at quality of what you're offering.
So what I'm hearing you say, Jim, is, and you're an enrollment guy, okay? You're one of the best in the country when it comes to enrollment. And what I'm hearing you say is enrollment is really dependent on what your focus is and what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah, you've got to look at, when you get into the business model, you can look at all things from how you're leveraging financial aid. Why do people want to come to you? What's you start thinking price points. What are the sorts of costs and everything? So when you get your chief financial officer starts looking at all those elements, you're controlling costs, trying to maintain quality at the same time. You're bringing people in. What are all your sources of funding? From your advancement side to, are you a public institution? What's your level of state funding? Has that gone from, state funded to state supported to state located? Or, where has that been trending? Types of thing is the amount of support. And obviously, your buildings and everything else have been paid for, a lot of them a long time ago. But within that is, what do you have to do to operate? Are you trying to grow an endowment? Is that growing? And is that interest off of that? And is it becoming a sustainable thing to help you support things? Or are you in a financial time at your institution where you're chipping away at that and eroding it? So having some of those realistic conversations also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're looking at things from a holistic perspective, really. It's not just about enrollment. And one of the reasons that you are as good at your job is you understand how these things work. And as a university president, your president should understand how all these pieces work together. I mean, what is your brand? What are you known for? Most higher ed institutions, you can't tell them apart. They're 98%. They all offer the same thing. So what makes you unique? What can you do that nobody else can?
Yeah, and that's and that comes into a lot of marketing communications types of things. That when you look at companies and consultants and things, and you look at everybody kind of out there, and if you've ever had a child recently going through the college recruitment process, and you've been the recipient of myriad pieces of emails and physical mailings, and you start getting to compare all of them, and you see kind of what the latest slogan, motto, et cetera, is that somebody's come up with, and different kind of branding approaches, you see a lot of the things kind of repeated over and over.
Mm-hmm. It is. And what ends up happening is parents who are, high school kids, parents looking at these sort of things, and real savvy high school kids will start thinking about, okay, what is this going to do for me in 20 years? What kind of debt am I going to have when I graduate? Am I going to be ready to jump into that first job? And it makes me kind of wonder, are we teaching kids the right things at school? And that comes back to, what is our niche at the school? And are we trying to attract the right people for that niche?
I look at that with my own kids or something. I have a freshman in college right now, and I have a junior in high school. They are very savvy about advertisement and what people are trying to get them to do in most things, except the things they aren't, where they don't realize they're subtly being sort of manipulated into doing something. And then, like all of us, it's hard to kind of have that awakening to like, whoa, okay. But they are looking at that value, and they're not, some of them are looking, they want to be able to make a decent living. They want to have something that's actually marketable. But at the same time, they're also looking at realizing, I don't have to be rich or extremely wealthy to have a good, fulfilling life. I don't want to trade in my happiness for money, for in just perpetuity kind of thing, realizing life could be short. We don't know. Who knows what kind of clock they have. So a lot of them, I think, are, at least my kids, are kind of have that realization that I want to do something that's worthwhile. I want to do something that I enjoy, but also that's going to fund my life and make sure it pays the bills. So they look at, what do you have to offer? Where is that cross? I think a lot of them too know that, they're kind of looking at, with this degree, with this education, and at least looking at prior models of where does that sort of cross, and controlling the amount of indebtedness too. So what can I do for scholarships? Can I work during the summer? That's very important to them too, because they realize debt and they don't want to go there. They've seen that play out from, even though they were younger, like the 2008 to now.
Yeah. The Great Recession reset a lot of people's financial expectations. And, thank heavens for the CARES Act and the other legislation that's come out of Washington to be able to help with finances. But, frankly, a lot of schools are not viable, and they would be far worse than they are right now had there not been the relief coming out of Washington. And students understand this nowadays. They understand it more than we did going to school. Of course, you and I never did get an education. We had a technical training based on our backgrounds at the Coast Guard Academy and the Naval Academy, respectively. But, students understand these things.
Yeah, I think we got to see a little bit, some different institutions at grad school and kind of compare those. I look at, there's sort of the going into the future too. One of the things that kids are really contemplating, and like my daughter's in a robotics club and doing a lot of build things for the world, the competitions and stuff coming up in March. So they're looking at things like robotics and automation, artificial intelligence. Where can I go and pursue a degree that's not going to be easily replicated by a machine or by an artificial intelligence program? Where can I get something? So there's kind of that balance between, I want something focused enough where it's attractive to employers, but not so focused that I'm just going to have a distinctive competency in using this one software program, and then 4 years from now, that software program is gone and everybody's using something else. So that thing I really knew changed. So do I have the ability to change and understand the basic principles of that and adapt to using new programs, new languages? Can I shift? And I think that's where people are looking for. I want a broad base with some distinctive niche kind of things that are attractive to employers, but then knowing I have the confidence to shift and adapt as the world around me changes, because they know it's going to change. They know between now, when they start school, when they graduate, and then even when they're in their career, they're going to have to shift and change and adapt. So that's where they need that confidence level that they can do that. And they've got those base level skill set things that they can apply towards almost anything as the world around them keeps moving.
So Jim, one of the things that AAC&U talks about with what employers want is the ability to work in teams, critical thinking, data literacy, the ability to interpret, analyze data. These are not your typical skills that you get when you're coming through a program. Let's put it this way. They're not advertised skills. But if you take a look at, you dig down into the institutional learning outcomes, the program learning outcomes, those sort of things, they should be there. How do we prepare students? And from the beginning, how do we get them ready to be job ready going through the program? I mean, that's something that I think you probably struggle with, isn't it?
Yeah, and that really goes into, curriculum, how you're doing that, being aware of those things. And surprisingly, a lot of those things you mentioned are a lot easier to build into a curriculum than, say, something that's too niche, like a very specific software program. Maybe you get into computer science, everybody's using this, or you're getting into design program, and this is the latest CAD program that you're using for this, or something you're going to use to bring it in and process data and statistics. And then there ends up being something else that's in vogue in the industry 4 years from now. But a lot of the things you mentioned, like, teamwork, and you're looking at critical thinking, and that might be things that, hey, those that are already doing them, it's more like highlight and recognize those things. So show those to students, tell them like, hey, you are doing this. And a lot of this is within different programs, within different courses that almost like lining out that you are going to learn these things about this subject, but also along the way, we're blending in teams. This is, showing you how to do critical thinking, et cetera. And with the Career Center or if you're highlighting those sorts of competencies you're gaining from that course, along with the course specific types of knowledge, helps students kind of reflect back and apply those to either a resume or a job or something they're seeking, so they know how to speak to those things. Because a lot of times they'll just be like, oh, I had this and I did this course and this kind of program, and they don't realize they've done these things. They just don't know how to speak to them or how to highlight and put themselves in the best light and going forward. When you mention something like data analytics, analysis, so much of things going now and into the future involve data to some degree. So I think of things like, how can you sort of enhance what you're doing now and enhance your marketability going forward? And this is where I was thinking of Matt Siegelman with Burning Glass, MZ, and doing some of those ties to what's industry looking for, what's higher ed doing, how do we make these connections better? I met him at a conference several years ago, talking to him, pointing out that you could have a psychology degree or, even a history degree, and people looking like, what do you do with history? Teach? You hear that common refrain. Somebody's like, what good is that? I think it's a lack of imagination, think that. But something like psychology, you could say, actually, you don't realize how much data you're doing and processing with that. Or even having a minor in something that's more focused on data and being able to show those courses and everything you took with data analysis and all that can make the difference between the typical graduate with that degree and somebody with a minor that focuses on data analysis has a $25,000 bump a year on average.
Mm-hmm. And so as an enrollment manager, how do you leverage those type of things trying to bring someone in?
You speak to those from everything. You got to have that total understanding of your institution from that strategic enrollment management kind of concept. And I think more and more as budgets get impacted, more players across the entire institution are realizing their role. So faculty to information services, computing center group, to getting that out to our recruiters and people in the admissions office, to financial aid, to housing, dining, health center, registrar's office, they're all wrapped up in this. And it's the messaging from the very beginning and being in touch with what are your programs, what are your strengths, having champions and players out there in faculty in different areas of what are our strengths, what do we do, how do we show this? Because we want to highlight those things like, hey, we have a new data science program. We have these things, keeping in touch with trends, but not just chasing programmatic trends, but what elements of your curriculum and your programs already do these sorts of things without creating a brand new thing. Highlight those. When students come, everything's in alignment past that too. So these things I talked about that on the course and even the curriculum and syllabus and stuff, do you mention those things and how they fulfill some of those things out there that are sought by employers, so students don't suffer that cognitive dissonance that you kind of talked about this, promised that, but when I got here, totally different. So you've got to have things in alignment so people don't suffer from that experiential thing. You want to build the entire way through that. This is what we have. This is why you want to come here. And when they have the experience of being here, working in those teams, doing those innovative things with creative faculty, having those experiences going out, meeting where alums are working and how they're doing things in the industry. And everything just builds on that to where your ultimate goal is they graduate and become a donor. That's our ultimate view of satisfaction of a student as a graduate who, not just a donor in terms of money, but we're looking at donors in terms of positive word of mouth. Did you have a good experience? Were you satisfied with your experience here at the University of Oregon?
And it's a holistic way of looking at it. I know Michael Crow there at Arizona State, he has said, you're not a student one time. It's not a commodity. We're looking to build a relationship with you to where you come back to Arizona State for your future education needs, whether it be a micro-credential, whether it be a certificate, whether it be a degree. It doesn't matter. We can provide you with what you need going forward. And it sounds to me like that's where you're going with what you're doing there at Oregon.
No, absolutely, Jerome. You want to, and some have done this very successfully in the past that, not just that, it's Well, like everything you said there, would you recommend to somebody else or friend or a friend's child or somebody else? But even just, doing that where people start looking into, is this the kind of place that still has a great reputation, looking long term, playing that long game, and someone's child wants to come back here? And you kind of build that just circular student life cycle. But absolutely, as you get into looking at things like micro-credentials, certificates, enhancing things, we have a really good College of Education, and a lot of teachers come down. We had a program in Canada and other places where they're coming down and experiencing a lot of our things here to enhance those teaching credentials that have to be bolstered every so often by taking a certain amount of credits or a program or certificate program online. Yeah, you just want to have that great ongoing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody says, in any sort of industry, costs a lot to recruit somebody, to bring somebody to you. So you've got to pay attention to that retention, and not just retention during their time as a current student and retention year to year from first to second to third year to graduate, but beyond that too.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what we started at the beginning of the conversation. What do you want to be when you grow up? You have to know who you are, what you do, and what kind of students to recruit.
Yeah, I know, absolutely understand. We were talking about this earlier. Who is your student? So, I look at people who are doing things in kind of ad agency sorts of things and communications of what are your audience persona. You're also looking at what is your student persona. So do you realistically, have you assessed and do you truly know who are all the different types of students that you cater to? Who are the people that you're serving? And what do you need to do to align all of your resources and everything you do to best attract them, support them, and make them successful in whatever their pursuits are? And you need to understand, what are those pursuits? What are their end goals they're trying to achieve? So it's not just, hey, we're selling this. Are you going to come buy it and use it? It's, what do you need? So, how many of us have sort of stopped and said, who are our students? Who are we trying to bring here? And what do they need? Rather than just, we have this, you come here. The traditional model's been, you come here, we have this, you're going to buy it, we're going to supply it, you're going to move on from there. So I think that's a big shift. And like I said, you've had some others you've spoken with who've had a lot of great success doing that. And it really depends on their understanding of what's their mission, who do they serve, and how do they deliver that service.
Mm-hmm. Are you looking for traditional students? Is your student body first generation? That's going to need different, just like Russell Lowry Hart at Amarillo College. You're going to need different resources if your typical student is Maria, who's a 25, 27-year-old woman working 2 jobs. That's a given. At Oregon, you have a different kind of student than Amarillo College. But nevertheless, you both know who your student is, and you provide them courses, you provide them skills, you give them the opportunity to learn in the areas they want to based on who you are and what they want.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the different sets of people we're looking at. You're looking at our traditional students. We're looking at serving veterans. We're looking at adult learners. We're looking at traditional high school age. We're looking at transfer students. We're looking at both domestic, international, resident, non-resident. How are you balancing all of those? How are you, quote unquote, shaping that class coming in? How are you serving all those myriad audiences and students that are coming to you? Yeah, it gets tricky, and you can't just focus on one thing. You have to realize that, again, going back to the demographic trends, how is that going to work out for you? And whatever you're doing successfully now, or you're sort of looking at how is your brand perceived? When people think of you, what do they think of? What ability do you have to shape that perception? And again, deliver on that perception when they're here in person. So that cycle continues in a positive way. And it's doing a lot of things in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's focusing on, can you deliver that good? Do you have the proper setup of your student body? Are you serving them well? Do you have the programs? Because ultimately, when students are coming, you can do everything else. You can have sports programs. You can have a great brand. You can have all these other things. But number one thing, when people start looking at websites and you start looking at analytics, they're looking for majors. They're looking for programs. They're looking at, what do you offer? Do you have what I'm interested in doing? Mm-hmm. So that's also something to understand about who your students are, is, do you offer the things that they're looking for? And being aware of future trends, where are things going? Can they position themselves by coming here that they're going to be successful with those future trends that are occurring too? And again, you can't just programmatically chase those, but be aware of those trends and what you already do and highlight those things and show people that, yes, we are doing those things.
Mm-hmm. So it really starts with, to me, what is your niche? What do you want to be when you grow up? And everything goes from there. And that to me is what enrollment's all about, is making sure that you can give the students what it is they want.
No, absolutely. I look at, if you don't have a gigantic endowment, if you don't have, a huge national reputation or a distinctive, recognizable brand, but still, who your audience is, the people that know you and where you're going out and where you're seeking those future students. And again, you have to have that self-possessed self-awareness as an institution. What are you? And what are you good at? You have to ask that question from the outside to yourself, is why? Why would somebody want to come here? And if you can't answer that, you need to answer that question first. And you need to really be, yes, this is us. This is what we have to offer. This is who we are. This is why somebody wants to come here. This is what we can do for you. And you have to make that message clear. And culturally across the institution, you should be out there marketing internally to help people understand who are we, whatever, that everybody at your institution becomes an ambassador for that place and understands down to that, 1 to 2 minute elevator speech of why. Because if they run into people, within travels, to neighbors, to whoever, can they speak to that if somebody asks them a question about your place?
And that sounds like a great place to end this, because we're running out of time here. I think we may have gone over a little bit. Jim, 3 takeaways for university presidents.
The main thing is the main thing is the main thing. Who are you? Why do you exist? It's that focus on what are we delivering, understanding who we are, why us? Mm-hmm. Can you answer? So the why us. The other one's understanding what is your mission. It depends. I mean, are you public, elite Ivy, small, private, community college? What's your mission? Who do you serve? So knowing that is then who are the students that you should be trying to recruit, that you're going to pull to you. Understanding them is going to help you understand their needs, is going to help you understand what's going to move things forward there. And last one is, when people get to you, do you deliver all these other things that you say you're this, you say you understand your students, do they experience that when they arrive at you? So have you shifted the culture? Does everybody at your institution understand those first 2 things? Do they deliver that experience overall so people don't suffer cognitive dissonance? They get there and then they experience that thing that you've said you understand, and we know who we are, we know who you are. Here's the experience we're going to deliver, and we're going to help you be successful in the rest of your life.
Those are great. Thank you. So, Jim, what's next for you? What's next for Oregon?
Oh my gosh. Drum, we're just, pursuing everything for us right now, and say things are looking pretty good, pretty positive. Again, everybody's kind of like, what's happening with the Omicron surge and the wave, and where are you on that trajectory? How are things going there? Kind of happy that we have a pretty high 97% student vaccination rate and just about a 95.5% staff faculty vaccination rate. And so that's kind of keeping us going there. Coming up next, just opened our new student welcome center. It's been a lot of fun. Got the World Track and Field Championships coming up on campus in July. That's going to be great to have the world come here and again have a chance to kind of showcase what we're doing here. All eyes will be on us, as that's the 3rd most televised thing in the world, behind the World Cup and the Olympics. That's kind of fun. And other than that, it's kind of keep on keeping on and doing all those things that we've talked about today, of looking to the future, watching trends, adapting.
And that's what the game is nowadays, is adapting and making sure that you can give a good product to that future student. Thank you, Jim. Great having you on the show. We'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening this week, and a special thank you to this week's special guest, Jim Baus, VP for Enrollment Management at the University of Oregon. and for his sharing with us what institutions can do to help overcome the new challenges in enrollment in the COVID and post-COVID eras. Our next guest is Tom O'Reilly, president of Pine Manor College in Boston. You may have heard about the merger between BC and Pine Manor, but what they are doing is truly amazing, especially in the areas of ensuring high school and first-gen students are college ready. We'll talk about all those things and more. Don't miss it.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.